You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Hristodoulou.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and today we're going over power rankings following Week 5 of the USFL. A little bit later than we normally do them. I typically do them Monday, but my Monday was jam-packed this week, so better late than never. But talk about a wild weekend. Depending on how you expected the games to shake out, this was either a weekend full of just nonstop upsets, or if you were like myself, a Saturday that I kind of expected to see play out the way it did, albeit a little bit of a hectic, I would say, Gambler Stallions game. But then on Sunday, I mean, you want to just talk about complete upsets, things that nobody thought they were going to see happen, ended up happening. There is a lot to talk about, a lot to get into, so make sure you comment down below. Let me know your power rankings, your thoughts, your opinions on this past weekend's games. All of that, would love to hear your opinions. But without further ado, we'll start breaking them down. Revealing in pairs with number 8 and number 7, the bottom teams of the league. We begin with the Michigan Panthers at number 8, and then the Philadelphia Stars at number 7. So the Panthers falling all the way to the bottom of the league now at this point. 3 home games and 3 straight losses. I still stand by the fact that I believe this Panthers team needs to give the Stallions a call and see if you can somehow, some way get Kyle Sloter away from them. Because right now, the quarterback situation in Michigan is just abysmal at this point. I don't really believe in Josh Love or Carson Strong being the answer at the quarterback position for this team. On top of that, you look at the running game, 18 total attempts running the football, 18 yards altogether. You're literally averaging 1 yard per carry. And this has just been a complete dousing of what felt like an offense that was on fire the first couple of weeks, and a team that kind of felt like they were on fire the first couple of weeks and have just kind of fallen off a cliff since week number 2. Breeland Speaks continues to be the very small bright spot of the team. Even Reggie Corbin is starting to struggle now, but I don't really know if I put it on him because the offensive line play in Michigan feels like it's regressing every single week more and more. They can't open up running lanes, and there's just constant tackles for loss. It feels like every other attempt to try to run the football. I don't know what the answer is in Michigan, but I think it starts with maybe trying to figure out if you can get yourselves a different quarterback under center over there. And on top of that, trying to figure out how to get the offense moving again, because right now, aside from their first 7 points that they put on the board, this Panthers team is flatlined. And I think that's probably the best way you can put it. As for the Philadelphia Stars, sitting at number 7 here with a win over the New Jersey Generals, one that I don't think a lot of people saw coming. I will say that while it's fun to watch a kicker go 8 for 8, end up being the reason you win a game, it's a good time, but it's not sustainable for W's. The glaring issues are still there, albeit they looked a little less apparent this week against a Generals team that offensively is kind of in a little bit of a rut, especially in the passing game, but you're still you had 2.5 yards per carry in this game, still a massive issue for the team. On top of that, you can't stop a single run when it comes to playing on defense. I mean, you're averaging 152 yards a game, which puts you 20-ish yards or so above the team that's right behind them in the Stallions. I mean, there are just so many glaring holes with this team, and yes, it's a nice win and an improbable win, one that I don't think a lot of people saw coming on Sunday, but ultimately this team, the way that they're kind of operating right now with the offensive line issues and just the inability to run the football consistently or even very much at all, I don't even know if you can say consistently. It's just, if it wasn't for the defense forcing as many turnovers as they did and being, able to capitalize on the dropped balls from Darius Victor, you're looking at a loss here, and it's a miracle that you came away with the victory on Mother's Day. So hats off to the Stars. You get the win here. Yeah, you beat the Generals, but I have them ranked below the Generals still because, again, I don't think, 8 for 8 field goals, again, is fun. It was cool to talk about. Luis Aguilar, I think, at this point deserves a shot a shot in the NFL. I don't know how you can dismiss going 8 for 8 despite whatever league it may be in. Yeah, he had a couple of 50-plus yard bangers. He's a guy that I think is going to find himself on an NFL roster come season's end for the USFL. But aside from that, not really a ton to be excited about. You got some great turnover opportunities, and your offense couldn't capitalize. You just kind of had to kept kicking field goals ultimately, and that's not winning football. Looking at numbers 6 and number 5, at the number 6 spot, we just talked about the team that beat them. The New Jersey Generals sit in at 6, and then the Memphis Showboats, back-to-back wins here now. You're showing signs of life with a very big, improbable win, but we'll talk the Generals first here with their loss to Philadelphia. 2 uncharacteristic fumbles from Darius Victor, ultimately really killing this team and kind of being what broke the camel's back in this one here. A lack of passing is also starting to, apparently it seems like it's starting to catch up with the Generals here as well. DeAndre Johnson left the game after being taken down following a throw. It sounded like the commentary team said something about the eye, and then we didn't see him the rest of the game. So I don't know if like maybe he got hit in the eye and that's kind of what it was. This was a game that I didn't really get to listen to while I was watching it. I had a pretty busy weekend. I was working Saturday, so I did not have any audio when I was watching the 2 games on Saturday. I was just watching them as they happened. So I feel like you miss a little bit of context and things when you're watching games like that. And then on Sunday, I had, obviously Mother's Day stuff to do, busy, but still watching the games as I was working my way through the day. And I did not catch what exactly happened to his eye, but we didn't see him for the rest of the game. So ultimately, Lauletta finishes out the game. I will say the passing attack looked a little bit better with him under center. Despite the interception he had once he took over, I feel like the offense moved a little bit better and kind of got into a little bit better of a rhythm. So I guess maybe pose the question, does Kyle Lauletta see more action as quarterback 1 going forward? I feel like this team can run the football really well. They have a really good defense at that. I mean, you literally held the Philadelphia Stars, who had multiple opportunities to punch it into 8 field goals. I mean, talk about bending but not breaking there. Good effort by them despite the offensive struggles. But if you can get a decent passing game going to go with that really good defense and a really strong rushing attack, that, again, it just kind of an uncharacteristic day with the turnovers there and the fumbles from Darius Victor. This team could maybe pose a little bit more of a threat in a very hotly competitive North Division right now where everyone sits at 2 and 3. But right now, I feel like until the Generals sort out what they're doing with their passing game, if we end up seeing Lauletta get some more opportunities here, do they maybe move back to the 2 QB system? Or maybe, does DeAndre Johnson take a seat? We don't know how bad this eye issue thing is, if it ends up being a long-term issue. But a little bit curious what the Generals do going forward. But right now, with a really good defense and a really good running attack, minus a passing attack that it needs to kind of figure itself out, I'm fine with them at 6. At number 5, like I mentioned, the Showboats. Improbable victory. Cole Kelly, another solid game. Not bad, not great, but I would say solid showing and probably some of the best you've seen out of a quarterback so far for this team through the 5 weeks that we've seen now. I've got to give them credit. This was not a game that I think anyone saw them winning here. You had an undefeated Breakers team that had been dumping points on teams left and right, and you hold them to just 10 points on defense. I feel like this game, all the credit in the world goes to the defense, because to be able to shut down a Breakers offense who has been killing teams the last few weeks, both through the air and on the ground, with Wes Hills emerging as a legitimate running back 1 for the team who can both catch passes out of the backfield and be a very good, patient, effective running back. I mean, you hold Wes Hills to 34 yards on the ground, just 2.7 yards per carry. He did have 7 catches for 46 yards, but ultimately his lowest total since he's been able to take snaps for the New Orleans Breakers. Hats off to the Showboats, because this is a team that 2 weeks ago, myself included, I feel like a lot of people were writing off as dead in the water, and people were calling this season pretty much a wash for them at this point. So hats off to them for being in the position that they are right now. 2 and 3 are not too far out of the running for the South Division. Wide receiver Vinny Papali continues to look really good as a receiving threat for them. Like I said, I feel like this is one group here that you don't really have a ton of like playmaking star power. So to see someone like Papali, back-to-back weeks now have some really good showings. He's starting to emerge as a guy there. I think you're really looking for a legitimate wide receiver 1 with Memphis, as you see a few people kind of like, it feels like every other week or so we're seeing somebody kind of show off a flash or 2 here or there, but not anything super consistent. So nice to see the Papalis showing some back-to-back strong efforts there, but the running game just continues to struggle. That's going to be an issue through the duration of the season, especially as you get later into the year and into those hotter summer months. I mean, we had 2 games this weekend that were like 100+ degrees in terms of what the temperature felt like. And you need to be able to at least run the football somewhat consistently. You can't just be gassing out your receivers again, especially as it gets hot. And we're talking like those games that are being played down in like Memphis or in Birmingham. You're talking games that are going to feel like that 100-degree weather. You need to be able to help give those wide receivers a break. So finding a steady running game is going to be key. But the Showboats right now at number 5, I feel good about it. I'm excited to see them make this little bit of a comeback here. This is not one that I expected by any means, and hats off to this team for pulling off an upset victory. Do I think that it was all the Showboats and maybe not necessarily, an issue with the Breakers end? I'm not going to go that far, and we'll touch on that a little bit when we get to the Breakers, but I do want to give credit where it's due for the Showboats picking up a very unlikely win. Looking at the next 2 teams here, at numbers 4 and numbers 3, we have the Maulers at number 4 with a big victory over Michigan, and then the Birmingham Stallions at number 3 taking a loss to the Houston Gamblers. So the Maulers continuing to find their footing offensively. Troy Williams has been a godsend for this team, and I kind of have a little comparison I'm going to throw out here in a second, but hear me out as I explain it. This is a team that has won 2 of their last 3 and had a very tight loss to a Birmingham Stallions team that is very good, obviously, just dealing with a lot of injuries right now. But Troy Williams, another outstanding outing. You look at the numbers, 15 of 19, 184 yards. He had a couple of passing touchdowns. He did have a pick, but he also had 10 carries for 59 yards and a rushing touchdown. The way I look at this Maulers offense right now, since Troy Williams has come in and taken over in that quarterback spot, it feels kind of like a Lamar Jackson type deal. I'm not saying he is Lamar Jackson. I'm not saying he is as good as Lamar Jackson by any means, but he is the heart and soul of this offense, where you have him and he's able to make some really good plays with some players on the team. And first person that comes to mind, Bailey Gaither, somebody who was an absolute monster last season of a wide receiver and is starting to really start to show those flashes again. That one-handed grab he had during the game, massive catch. That was a thing of beauty. Great throw, great ball placement, excellent extension on Gaither's part to make the catch, and on top of that, in stride to continue going forward and gain some yards after the catch as well. And then you have a defense that is just continuing to suffocate offenses week in and week out. You're still minus Reuben Foster right now with the injury he's dealing with, and I can only imagine just how much further this defense is going to elevate when he gets back in the fold. The Maulers are trending in the right direction at the right time in a wide open North Division, and is arguably the best team right now and the most complete team in the North, which is not something I would have expected to say even just a couple of weeks ago. But with the Generals just really struggling to find any footing in the passing game, the Stars are relying on 8 field goals offensively to win, and you have a Panthers team that kind of feels like they're dead in the water. They're in like the complete opposite direction of the Maulers at this point. There is a case that the Maulers are the top team in the North, and I literally cannot believe that's coming out of my mouth, but here we are. Hats off to them for the turnaround that they've been working through, and I expect to see more victories as they continue on with a very stifling defense and an offense that is just keeping defenses on their heels. Troy Williams has been fantastic for the Maulers. As for the Birmingham Stallions, this is one where there's a lot of conversation that can be had, especially when we get into the Gamblers here, because the reaction post-game was one that I'm not really surprised to have seen. I feel like when it comes to fandom, especially in the heat of the moment, very upset. Hot takes are flying left and right about what was going on. There was a lot of discussion as far as how the officiating was handled and things like that. And I made sure to do my due diligence and go back on a lot of key situational penalties and or confirmations of touchdowns or confirmations of non-catches, things like that, to make sure I really had a good grasp of everything and had some good opinions on this all. You look at the way this game played out for the Stallions. We're talking 10 penalties for a grand total of 106 yards. I understand being frustrated by that because that is an awful lot of penalties. Then you look at the Gamblers and they weren't even penalized in the game. And do I think that there's a possibility you probably missed a penalty or two on the Gamblers? Absolutely. I have a hard time buying in any game when a team doesn't get called for even a single penalty that something wasn't missed here or there. I feel like there's always penalties being committed, and there's things depending on how egregious they are and just how much they actually affect the play that things maybe get let go or things that are just not necessarily called or seen depending on where it all happens. There's a lot that goes into it. However, 10 penalties for 106 yards, you can't sit there and blame the refs for losing a game when your team cannot get their own heads out of their own asses. Listen, I understand there is a very strong narrative of officiating in football right now, or even just in sports in general with, oh, it's rigged and blah, blah, blah. I saw people spouting off about how Fox isn't in the football game to actually have a legit football league. It's all for entertainment, and this game showed it and blah, blah, blah. No. The Birmingham Stallions, again, just could not get out of their own way in this game. And that's probably the biggest takeaway that I have from this, because they're so talented that despite all of the issues that were self-inflicted on their end, they were still in it at the very end, fighting tooth and nail to potentially pull off a comeback that just, was just as much out of your grasp. Injuries are really hurting this team right now, and I think that's where you really have to look at the problems with the Stallions at this point. It's not that they got screwed out of the victory, it's just that they are hurt and hurt bad. And once you start getting some of these playmakers that were missing from the Birmingham Stallions back, we're going to start to see more of a team that's reminiscent of the first few weeks and last season with just how dominant they were as a whole. I still think that the Stallions, just in terms of like pure roster talent, are arguably the best in the league. But these injuries at some point were going to take their toll, and I think they finally reared their ugly head against the Houston Gamblers. And it's just unfortunate. It's a divisional game and one that kind of ended somewhat controversially with a few catches that were either called no catches or were catches. And my point on that, the Damian Davis catch was not a catch. That ball very clearly hit the ground as he was catching the ball. The catch rule is a very weird one, and there's a lot that goes into it. And for me to help people understand where I'm coming from on this, I have friends that officiate. I have taken deep dives into the ruling to help myself understand it. And I've talked with people because I hate the controversies around the catch rule in football as a whole. I wish it was more clear or it was made a little bit more transparent for people to understand, but it is a very complicated rule. And I don't really think that there's a simple way to really put it together easily. But from my understanding of the rule, the ball hits the ground as he's catching it. The ground more than enough was up against that football as it was caught into his chest as he hit the floor. The ground was not a catch. Not even a doubt in my mind. I went back and watched it over and over and over again. There was not a single angle that I looked at it and was like, you know what, maybe the ground didn't help him secure that. No, that ball was loving up against the ground. Not a catch. Overall, Stallions are still a great team. They are definitely a team that can still absolutely win the South. Injuries are just mounting with this team. That is my biggest takeaway right now. I'm not going to sit here and doubt the Stallions and overreact and say they're not a top team in the league at this point. They're just hurting and hurting bad. Run defense is suffering because of it. They cannot stop a nosebleed right now on the ground, and that's just because of injuries. Scooby Wright being one of the really big ones that a lot of people are missing on the team right now. Once this team gets healthier, hopefully towards the back half of the season, things will start to clean up a bit, but injuries are just mounting, and that's my biggest takeaway for the Stallions at this point. And for them to be fighting tooth and nail the way they are and be in every single game despite all that, I think is a testament to how talented this team is. And this is all coming from a Breakers fan, mind you. Talking the top two teams, though, this is where some answers are probably, or questions are going to be answered, curiosities and whatnot. Who's at the top? Who's at number 2? To reveal them, at number 2, I have the Houston Gamblers and the New Orleans Breakers still set at number 1. The Gamblers win over Birmingham. I'll get this out of the way. The Anthony Ratliff-Williams touchdown was called a catch for a touchdown. That was the initial ruling on the field. It does not get turned over because, honestly, yes, the ball hits the ground. It does not move enough, though, for it to be for that call to be turned over. I understand that some people might see the ball hit the ground and think, oh, the ball hit the ground, it's not a catch. That's not necessarily how the rule is explained. The ball can hit the ground if it doesn't, knock the ball out of the receiver's hands, if it doesn't impede the possession in any way. I don't really think it did, or if it did, not enough that you can sit there and definitively say that this call needs to be turned over. And that's why the ruling on the field stood as called. It wasn't confirmed. It was stood as called. So that's as far as I'm going to go with that. It's a very weird system that is used with the way, or not, I don't want to say weird because that's not the right word, but it's a very complicated system, the way rulings are kind of confirmed and whatnot. It was a catch. And I feel like you have a really hard time turning that over no matter what angle you looked at it from. Again, another one that I sat there looking at it over and over and over again. I think it was a touchdown catch. Is it very close? Absolutely. I'm not going to sit here and deny that. But for the Gamblers, beyond that, to go in against Birmingham without quarterback Kenji Bahar and be able to storm back in that fourth quarter and put up 20 points, again, taking advantage of the Stallions just kind of shooting themselves in their own foot, fatigue starting to settle in. This is another game that felt like it was 100 and some odd plus degrees during that game. At some point, the Stallions were going to run out of steam. The roster is thin. You got a lot of guys who wouldn't be necessarily taking as many snaps as they are, and it was an opportunity that the Gamblers took advantage of, and they were able to come away with a victory. I do have a question as to why Terry Wilson was pulled right after leading a scoring drive. That did not make sense to me. Montel Cozart came in, and I think that really killed momentum for the Gamblers. Not sure what that was all about. I would love to hear like a legitimate in-depth explanation on that one. I haven't listened to any of the press conferences yet, but again, very busy week, but I'm curious to see what was asked or said about that regarding that whole situation. But this defense, as far as the Gamblers is concerned, continues to get better each and every week from what I've been seeing. I really like the way they played this week, especially late in the game to, be able to shut things down and ultimately come away with a victory. I know that the Stallions were kind of potentially pulling off a comeback effort there, but ultimately the Gamblers defense was able to tighten up, shut things down, and pull off the victory for the team. It feels like the Gamblers are coming into their own. And again, to not have Kenji Bahar in this game, to come in with a backup quarterback and, a lot of uncertainty going into this one here, hats off to the Gamblers. You have got to give them credit for being able to go in and get that victory there, because that is not one that I think a lot of people expected to be a victory for the Gamblers, all things considered. I picked the Gamblers to win prior to knowing Kenji Bahar was going to be out, but Terry Wilson, very good quarterback, very athletic, clearly was a bit of an issue for the Stallions late in the game. And, I would feel comfortable as a Gamblers fan going with Terry Wilson as long as Kenji Bahar needs to get himself back and 100% ready to go. As for the Breakers staying at number 1, this is kind of a hard one for me to do, but I feel like I had a hard time rationalizing anyone else above them based off of everything I've seen so far this season and even just the last week or two. I feel like at the very end, there is maybe an argument for them to be number 2, but I would need to hear a strong argument for who's supposed to be number 1. And I still look at the Breakers as one of the most talented teams from top to bottom on both offense and defense right now, that I just have a hard time, despite their loss to Memphis, as being as shocking as it was. I think it was somewhat of a combination of just overlooking your opponent and maybe not necessarily expecting to get the fight that you got out of them during that game. So while, and I mentioned this briefly with the Showboats, I do give them credit for the victory here. I also kind of want to look at the Breakers and go, shame on you, because it kind of felt like they were we're just going to keep feeding West Hills the ball and kind of go from there. But at some point, while I understand how hot West Hills has been since he's taken over at the running back spot for the Breakers, you can't rely on him too much, and I feel like there was starting to be a bit of an over-reliance on him. And hell, I was pounding the table, keep feeding him the ball, but it feels like maybe a little bit too much of a reliance was being put onto him. And McLeod Bethel-Thompson, for as good of a season he had, did not have his best game. I could say arguably his worst game of the year, which was not bad in the scope of things, but it was bad for the performance that he's had so far this year. I would say if it's not his worst, it's the second worst game he's had this year. And on top of that, their inability to convert on third down was just an absolute disaster for the team. You go 4 of 10 and it just felt like you had ample opportunities to continue moving the ball, and you just could not convert when you needed to the most. So you're punting the football, and you had a couple of failed fourth down attempts as well. They went 1 for 3 on fourth down. It was just a messy game for them offensively. The defense did an excellent job keeping them in the game. It was just the offense kind of felt like they were either shooting themselves in the foot or just could not convert when they needed to keep the ball rolling and get themselves even just close enough for another field goal. Hell, never mind a touchdown, just to get into field goal range. So hats off to the Showboats. I still look at the Breakers as the top team right now, despite their massive upset loss. I just have a really hard time arguing against them right now with the state of everyone else in the league at this very moment. But if you wanted to sit here and argue that another team does belong over them, I'd be more than happy to hear it in the comment section, because I definitely think there's arguments to be made. I just personally myself could not come up with one. So I would definitely love to hear that from one of you if you have any thoughts and opinions on that one there. But those are my power rankings following week number 5. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. But as always, if you made it to the end of the video, I greatly appreciate you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. We're getting real close to 900 subs, and we're working our way to that big 1,000 goal. But that's it for me. I'll catch you all next time. Have a good one.